Hi everyone, my name's Angela and today I'm going to be talking about 25 books that I really want to read in 2025. I did this challenge last year and if you're curious to see how I did, I will put a graphic up on the screen right now. I did not read all of them, which is not too surprising because I'm not necessarily a completionist. I definitely struggle with like giving up on things. So at a certain point of the year, I was kind of done trying to meet this goal, if I'm being honest with myself. But I still did pretty well and some of these books are new favorites, so that's really great. When I made this list last year, every single book on the list was from my physical TBR, and that is not the case now. After Christmas, I have 60 books on my TBR. I always wanted to get down to 50 before Christmas so that I didn't have to feel stressed about getting fun new books for Christmas. So I will start with the books that I own that are on this list, and then we will move on to books that I do not own. First up, we have The Stationery Shop by Marjane Kamali. This is a sad and tragic love story between two young people in 1950s Tehran, and I'm sure it ends with something sad because a lot of people cry reading this book, so I'm not expecting a romance exactly, but I'm expecting a beautifully written historical fiction, and I'm excited to learn more about this time period and also hopefully fall in love with these characters. Another historical fiction I want to read is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I believe this moves throughout time, and we start out in Ghana in the 18th century. We're following two half-sisters. It says we're following the parallel paths of these sisters and their descendants through 8 generations. I do love a multi-generational historical fiction, and I've heard people absolutely rave about this, so I hope that I have the popular opinion rather than the unpopular opinion with this one. Next up is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I have read 3 or 4 other Toni Morrison books and I really love her work, as does everyone. It says our main character is a young black girl who prays every day for beauty, and she's mocked by other children for the dark skin, curly hair, and brown eyes that set her apart, and she yearns for blonde hair and blue eyes. A lot of people read this book in school and really love it. I was never assigned this one, so I'm excited to read it and finally see what all the hype is about. That feels silly to say about a classic, but there is hype. I think the last classic on this list is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Apparently this follows 2 intertwined families, and the synopsis also says that it's often brutal, so we will see. But this is also a classic that I've seen a lot of people read like of their own volition in adulthood and like really love it, so I'm hoping I feel the same way. Moving on to some fantasy, there's gonna be a lot of fantasy on this list. Next one is The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. I read her new book The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I found this used at my local indie a couple months ago and I just couldn't resist buying it, even though I was on a book buying ban. The first line of the synopsis says, "Off the coast of Ireland sits a legendary island hidden by magic. A place of ruins and ancient trees, sea salt air, and fairy lore." That sounds amazing and perfect for me. Next up is one of those fantasy books that has just like been one of the most popular fantasy books for like a long time, and that is The Lies of Locke Lamore by Scott Lynch. I think this is one of those books, like many fantasy books, where we're following like thieves and criminals in some sort of big city in this fantasy world, and I believe there's a society called the Gentlemen Bastards and they are thieves. Apparently there's also a bloody coup, so it sounds like something I could really get into. Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout is a Pulitzer Prize winner that takes place in a small town in Maine, and we have this retired school teacher who seems to be reflecting on the changes in the town and like describing different people's lives, and it seems very cozy but also sad and introspective. Yeah. And honestly, I thought that this one sounded Gilmore Girls-esque, and that's why I picked it. The Lost Queen by Signe Pike is definitely one of the books that I am the most excited to read, solely because of this description that says it is Outlander meets Camelot, 2 things that I love so much, and the back also says that there is a strong like feminist leaning in this book, so I'm very excited for this one, and if I don't love it, I will be devastated. This next book is A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and apparently Lady Trent in this fictional world is the world's preeminent dragon naturalist, and I think that this could be really clever and unique and almost cozy, but I'm also really excited to read like kind of a science-y feeling book about dragons. That sounds amazing. I would also love to get to A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This seems like it is an urban fantasy that takes place in London. No, Oxford. It says that there is an alchemical manuscript and witches and demons and even vampires and romance and suspense, and I'm just like, y'all are making it sound like it's going to be the perfect book, and I'm so excited. I also would really like to watch the TV show, but I wanted to read the book first, so hopefully I really love it. Our next book is The Rune of Kings by Jenn Lyons. In this, I believe our main character is a thief who discovers that he is a long-lost prince, and then he's kind of brought into this world of, you know, royals and politicking and all of that, and there are dragons. And also apparently demons, gods, prophecies, true love, and something about the hero. So is he the hero or is he the villain? We shall see. Next up is another one that I think would be like my top anticipated book of all of these. It is blurbed on the front by S.A. Chakraborty, who is probably my favorite fantasy author. Ooh, that is a big thing to say. She's definitely one of my top favorite fantasy authors. And that is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, who I believe are a writing duo. So apparently our main character, Ren, is a con artist, and she comes to this sparkling city with the goal of tricking her way into the noble house. And I've also heard that this one has a queer romance in it, and from the cover it seems like there's going to be like masked dances and balls and stabbings and nobility and feuding, and that all sounds right up my alley. And then Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb is the next book in my journey through the realm of the Elderlings. In this series we are following different characters from the ones in the first trilogy, and I believe these ships are actually sentient and they are made out of this like magical wood, and I believe we're following a family of like merchants or traders, and so there's going to be like some pirate vibes, some family drama as well, and I'm super excited, but I'm also nervous that I'm not going to love this as much as the Farseer trilogy, and that I'm going to be like just missing those characters and that storyline. So high hopes, but also nervous. And then I have one library book that I'm actually currently reading. It's January 1st, and that is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is the third book in the, what's it called? Broken Earth trilogy. Yeah, the first book is the 5th season, and that book was I believe it was my 4th favorite book of last year. I think that's how I ranked it, but yeah, it was in my top 10. And I also read the second book in December, and so I'm finishing out the trilogy. I'm very excited to see how all of these characters and storylines end up and learn the rest of the lore about this world that we have been eagerly waiting to learn. Then we have Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I will always read Emily Henry's new releases pretty much as soon as they come out. This one is apparently about 2 writers who are competing to write the life story of some sort of heiress or famous celebrity woman, and I've heard that it kind of has like a Taylor Swift Last Great American Dynasty kind of vibe, so that's very exciting. Another new release romance I'm really excited for is Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. Her novel Out on a Limb was my favorite romance of 2024, so I'm definitely going to be reading everything that she releases for the foreseeable future. And I believe that this one is about a couple or a married couple possibly who are like working through some issues. It's kind of like a second chance romance, fix the relationship kind of book, and they're out in the woods for some reason, camping or a retreat of some sort. I don't know, but I hope I love it. I really want to read James by Percival Everett. I read Huck Finn in college, and I had so many questions and confusing thoughts and opinions about that book, and I think that reading a reimagining of that book from James's perspective, written by a Black man, is just like such a perfect way to continue that like literary journey I started. Very different vibe from James, but I would like to try out Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is a romantasy book that I have seen some reviewers that I trust really enjoy. I definitely want to try fantasy romance or romantasy more in 2025 because fantasy and romance are 2 of my favorite genres, and in my head I feel like I have this perception of romantasy as just like bad fantasy books with just a bunch of smut scenes, and I see a lot of like negative reviews of those books by people who are fantasy readers. But I want to try some out for myself. I want to see if there are some out there that I could really love, and I think they could be a really good time. But I'm also worried that I'm going to have those same critiques of like, the fantasy world building isn't great and I don't want just like endless smut scenes. So let's see how it goes. I also want to try out Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling, another romantasy book, but this one has dragons. Also, I have no idea what the plot of Spark of the Everflame is. I'm so sorry. For Fear the Flames, I know that there is a pair of people, I think, who are working together or thrown together and they hate each other, so it's like enemies to lovers. And I believe this woman is like trying to get her dragon back and there's like a heist. Could be wrong, but there are dragons on the cover, and that's all I need to know. Another like sub-genre or different genre I want to try out this year is like cowboy yeehaw romance. So I'd like to read Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is definitely one of those cowboy romances that I see people like absolutely love, and if I like it, there are a bunch more books in the series and by this author, and I think the setting of like being on a ranch could be really fun. There's like small town vibes, and I love a small town setting in a romance book. So I'm like excited but nervous to read this because I don't want to hate it, but I might hate it. I don't know. Next up is Greta and Valden by Rebecca K. Riley. I've heard this described as like a funny indigenous version of, not version, but it's like a funny indigenous Schitt's Creek-esque book. I believe we're following two siblings who are both queer and their lives are kind of chaotic and or funny and or sad, and I will probably listen to this on audio. I've had it on hold for a while, but I'm excited to try this one out. It sounds very intriguing. A book that I think millions of us are going to be reading is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the new Hunger Games prequel that follows Hey Mitch's Games, and I'm so excited to read this and get drawn back into the world and hopefully be as obsessed with it as I was with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in 2023. Another new release I'm really excited for is Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is the sequel to Vera Wong's Unsolicited Guide for Murderers. Advice for Murderers? The titles are long, I'm really sorry. Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, yeah. And I really loved that book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I listened to it on audio, so I will probably listen to the sequel on audio as well. Another genre I want to try out a little bit in 2025 is science fiction, so I really want to read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This one is described as cozy science fiction, which I think could really work for me. And I believe we have robots in the wild. Kind of reminds me of The Wild Robot, which I haven't read, but I watched the movie and really loved. And it's like a short science fiction novel. It might even be a novella. I'm a little nervous about that one, but I'm excited to try it all the same. And lastly, we have another fantasy book, which is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is a Roman Empire inspired fantasy book that takes place at this academy, and I believe that our main character is like rising through the ranks. I've heard that there's an interesting magic system and he might be like investigating a murder or something. People love this book. This has an insanely high rating on Goodreads. I've seen multiple people have this in their like number 2 or number 1 spot. I think last year and this year. So I'm really excited to try this one out. If it works for me, then I think it could be like a new favorite. And you know, if it doesn't work for me, I could always DNF. If I do DNF any of these books, it will count as a check mark because, you know, I tried it out, I did my best, and it just wasn't for me. But hopefully I get to all of these books. I don't want to put too much pressure on myself because being told that I have to do something is not necessarily a great motivator for me unless I'm in school, but I'm not in school anymore. But I did get my husband to agree to taking me book shopping for like 1 to 3 books at the end of the year if I read all of these, so that could be really fun and hopefully a good motivator to get me to read all of these. Those are all of the books that I really want to prioritize in 2025. Let me know if there are any books that you really want to get to this year. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a lovely week.